how can you explain the unexplainable?
I haven't run into such a tricky story yet in my life.
It was so powerful. I had nobody to talk to for years.
Have people called BS on you?
You want to believe me? Fine. If you don't, fine. I don't care.
All right, today I'm here with Lura Ketchledge. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here and to talk about your story with me. While I was doing my research on you and watching interviews and diving deep, I discovered many really cool things about you. One of them is that you're an author. You've published several books already. And what's really cool about you is that you had what's called an NDE, which is a near-death experience, where actually you passed away for a period of time, experienced the afterlife, and then came back to your body. And here we are today with you kind of relaying that information. But what I wanted to say was that for me, I'm a practical spiritualist, as I would call it. Metaphysics and spiritualism, universal law, those kinds of things. I don't go in a religious direction. I don't go in a new age direction. I'm trying to make heads or tails of one, what am I doing here? What's my purpose? What's my function? And how do I be the best person that I can possibly be? How do I show kindness and compassion at every possible turn that I can, but also at the same time, not allowing people to take advantage of me? Right? So there's this very fine line. And as I'm listening to your story, some of it made so much sense as far as missing information that I've had. You have this very hey, I went through this experience. There's really didn't seem to be much of an agenda other than you went through this experience and now here you are, and relaying that experience really seems like without agenda. So I really love that. And I also want to thank you for filling in certain gaps for me that have been missing from my understanding of things, which is, in my opinion, very rare that I run into somebody or someone's narrative that fills in gaps, especially for someone like myself who's looking for reason and logic and things to make sense. At 19, you had a horseback riding accident in where you died and experienced life after death. Upon coming back to life in this body, you retained what you referred to as a skeleton of your experience in the afterlife. Can you elaborate on what that means? And do you think there were parts of your experience that you didn't retain or couldn't continue to hold on to as you came back into your physical body?
Well, that's a very good question, and no one's asked me that. Remember, I was 19 years old. This is the days before, the internet and talk about near-death experience. So when I had this near-death experience and I started coming back to physical reality and I knew I was coming back, I felt like layers and layers of information were being stripped away from my memory or my consciousness for a reason. And I was only able to remember the skeleton part. But I remember that when I was during the near-death experience, that I had these epiphanies, these explanations of information. And it wasn't a come to Jesus moment. But when I was coming back, they were being stripped away and taken away. And I felt anguish as I was coming back. I remembered some of it, but not the full experience.
So I'm correct to some degree in assuming that when you came back, you only retained that skeleton of information.
Absolutely.
Much of the whole experience is missing from the current narrative that you have around it, yeah?
Yeah, and there's a lot of grief associated with that loss too. Sadness that I felt, profound sadness that information was taken away from me as I was coming back. And I still feel it 40 years later, sadness over it.
Do you think that the information that you retained upon coming back was the information that was relative that you actually needed, and the other information wasn't necessarily relative?
No, I think what I retained was a gift. The whole experience was an awakening that I knew that I was more than my physical body. There was a continuation of existence after death. And some of the conversation I had with my late grandfather, that was the most important thing that really happened to me, Chris. You get flashes and as the years go by, you get flashes and revelations from it. So it's like a PSTD thing, you'll get a flash of something and remember it, but you can't connect the dots. It's very, at times distressing and at other times really comforting.
The next question I have for you is, why campaign to share your story instead of just like telling it as a fun Thanksgiving cool story? Why
Well,
campaign to share it with the masses?
yeah. Well, I had the accident at 19 and it propelled something in me, this drive to write novels, but I'm not pitching them today. And I was explaining the afterlife in a fictional story as best I could because I had these dreams and I just had to get this out. So I finished writing the books and stuff, and I talked to some publishers and they said, well, you're over 50, you've got no internet footprint and blah, 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 blah. You'll never sell these stories. And a family member said something to me before she died, a few months before she died. And she said, you've had this amazing near-death experience. You should tell people. It's positive. So, you know what I loved about being 50? The embarrassment gene kind of fades. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be really honest, I wish I heard a story similar to mine before I had the accident. It would have helped me. So, I just came forward and people were interested in the story, and I got asked to do some podcasts and did some television and whatnot. But I wanted to share the story because I didn't want to leave this earth without telling people what a wonderful thing it is. And there's been other people I've heard about the near-death experience that are totally spot on, some that aren't.
I guess my question to you was why share it with the masses? And for me, when I asked that question, when I wrote that question down for you, I said, you know what? The answer is very simple for this because, you sharing your information is filling in gaps for me. And I actually
Yeah.
know several people that have had NDE stories, some of which make sense. But again, it's very personal to that person and very unique to that person. And they came back with a gift, whether it's to heal or to teach or spread some sort of message. That's very common. But with you, you came back and you kind of just told your story, which I really like because it allows me as an outsider to take things out of that story that you're telling and put it into my story and be like, you know what, that was missing. That's a puzzle piece that's missing from my story. So I want to thank you for that because you really, I don't think you can realize the value of some of your story. And how it played a major part in my narrative over the last 2 weeks. You've really
I'm
filled in some
glad.
gaps for me
I'm
with
glad.
your story.
But it took me 30 years to build up the courage to talk about it. I talked about it to a few family members and one friend, but I didn't want to be labeled as a wackadoo. I'm not a let's hold hands, sing kumbaya type of person. Um, I'm just a regular middle class, average American that happened to have a terrible accident.
You mentioned that, from listening to your story, when you passed over, you actually met with your grandfather, and your grandfather was part of the guiding process of you going
Yeah.
through that whole thing. And then eventually, when you had to come back, you had to leave your grandfather, which I understand was a very sad moment for you. But one of the things that I heard you say, which is like you didn't have this Jesus Christ awakening moment, and you said that to me before we started the interview as well.
Yeah.
So what does that mean to you, and why are you using that terminology? It seems significant to you.
Well, the reason is my grandfather was a Presbyterian minister, theologian that graduated from Princeton. I went to Sunday school. I sang in the choir. I went to Bible school. I thought that I would have more of an indoctrination to organized religion. When I was a kid, I mean, you listen to the Bible stories and how realistic is that, the burning bush and stuff. And I sort of believed it, but I never bought into it. I took what I liked out of Christianity was the love and kindness and goodness. And I kind of stopped there and I stopped going to church. So when I had this near-death experience, I didn't go to the pearly gates or have what you would think, what I expected that organized religion tells you. And then I thought about it after I had the near-death experience, and I said, well, organized religion is in the control business. Organized religion does a lot of great things. It also gave us the Inquisition and some other rather bad things,
Yeah.
But I realized I disconnected from it and thought, I'm going to think for myself. I'm not going to be told how to think. I'm going to think for myself. And I think the answers we can get as an individual, we can get some of the answers while while we're living. We don't have to die to get them. And then we also don't have to be told you don't have to take everything. from organized religion. You can take the good parts that make sense, but you don't have to be controlled by it.
So when you passed, or you thought you were going to meet Jesus potentially, or that you were going to be judged based on your Christian beliefs versus not?
Yeah.
And that didn't happen at
Like
all.
when you have a life review, okay, when you die, you're going to have a life review. At least I did. I'm just guessing that would go for other people. And it's not like a judgment or anything like that. It's, you see the other person's point of view. I think it's more of a realization and education, not a punishment. So like, but if you're a really bad person, I mean, you've done some bad things, like you're a criminal and stuff, I think it would be a lot different. I can't speak for that. But I saw, you know, stupid things I did, selfish things I did as a kid and a teenager, and how it affected the other person, but I felt it from their point of view, not mine.
Yeah, I heard that from you, and that was one of the things that filled in a gap for me. It makes so much sense to me that, you know what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to own up to everything you did, even things you don't remember, things that didn't necessarily register with you as hurtful to another person are going to be put in your path, and you're going to have to see that.
On the flip side, there's some things that you do that are good, that, you know, that you didn't think were really important, that were huge, that really mattered, that really were big on the other side. Let's say you find a lost child here. That's a good thing. Everybody's glad, the kid's fine, a lot of yada, yada, yada. But over there, in a non-physical reality, it's a lot bigger. It's a lot more important than you realize. So there are some really good things on the flip side. But I saw some parts of myself that I didn't like. And also, you know, I'm 65. I would process a life review very different than a 19-year-old kid who was scared out of her mind.
You explained that part of your afterlife understanding was that we are not just one individual experiencing life through one lens, but are experiencing many lives at once in different bodies, not just in relationship to past and future, but in our present time, living many lives simultaneously, meaning our lives can overlap or even interact with each other. What is the point of experiencing life through so many lenses, and can you elaborate on your understanding of what that accomplishes?
Well, let me preface this. Okay, when soul, your essence, decides to come into physical reality to learn many lessons. You know, we're here to learn to love, but this is a learning, it's a school with mandatory attendance. Okay. From what I understand, that the soul fractures into different personalities at different times in history, different sexes, different ethnic backgrounds. And you experience physical reality, you live your life, you know, and then eventually you'll pass away and hopefully bring valuable lessons back to the source. The idea of reincarnation or multiple lives creeps me out. I don't like it. I don't want to be 13 again with braces. I don't want to be some poor person, destitute, or, you know, anything like that. But I was shown that I've had multiple lives up close and personal, and it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to take in.
You as an individual are here existing in the world, coming from your own source, which I have another question around this, but you are coming from your own source. I think a lot of people have this idea that there's an ultimate source, but one of the things that I took from your story that I was like, man, that makes so much sense, is that we actually are coming from our own individual source, that we ourselves essentially are the creator in our own movies, that we are actually making these kinds of decisions of where, when, why, and how, and then we're manifesting in this way and removing from ourselves the fact that we're coming from source, so that we can actually experience this world in real time. This is my understanding of what your narrative is. Am I good so far?
Yeah, you're saying it better than I could.
Okay, so with that, when you're coming back now, going back into the afterlife, you are now experiencing and realizing, oh, I'm just a fraction of my source. My source is putting this spark of itself in a physical body. And one of the things that came up to me, I was like, you know what? I bet you there's so many sparks of soul going into so many other dimensions in X, Y, and Z at the same time. Because like you said, there's past, present, and future. And your soul is putting, we see present as now, But
Yes,
for other incarnations of ourselves, we could be living in the future already. We could be living in the past. Which again, I
yeah,
think that the
yes,
word source is used so haphazardly that I would really
yes.
like you to help us understand here your understanding of the overarching source, which would be considered God, and then your actual individual idea of source.
Yeah, that's two separate things. When I was out of body and I went to the source and I was, your higher self, your higher self. A lot of people say that. When I went to source, it was like floating in a sea of love. And I knew that other beings or personalities were around me. And it's literally like floating through clouds, and music came in random waves, like washing over us, like in the sea. And it was so beautiful and so much love and so much bliss. And it didn't last for very long, but those were my other personalities, I believe. But having been to source, my source changed my whole conception of the world. You're never the same when you come back. And it was beautiful, and the bliss and it was just wonderful. And so I'm glad it wasn't a bad experience. It's just not something you talk to at a dinner party. But I believe that was my personal source. I really do. And I think that God is probably more incomprehensible to the human mind than we can imagine, and that it's so much further than I went.
If we're coming from our own individual source, then
Right.
are we retaining that individuality from your understanding in the afterlife? When you go back, you're still you existing in the
Yeah,
after as a part of your
yeah.
source.
You're still you with all your personality and your, your insecurities and your all your knowledge. It blows my mind. I was still me. I was still Lura, out of body. I didn't like merge or blend into others, have, absorb their thoughts or personalities at all. I was still in it, very much an individual.
Were
Now
you
that's as
were
far
you
as I got.
coexisting with your other incarnations?
I think so. I mean, I can only tell you what happened to me. I can't speak for my other incarnations. I mean, I've seen them, kind of creepy. But I was still me. Think of physical reality as an orange, and it's got an outer skin, it's got a dermis, this is where we're at. We're at the furthest out, different levels or rings or whatever you call around physical reality. And then you get into more thought responsive consensus realities. So a lot of people don't make it to source. Like when they die, they settle for a cheap version of heaven, is what I call it. They go into other consensus realities, maybe where, relatives are there. It looks like the best version of Earth. There's no war, there's no crime, there's no disease, and you're young. So I don't know how long it take you stay there, but ultimately, you're heading towards source. Now, I have some guesstimates about what happens, but I think most people don't leave, they don't go very far after they die. I think you have to have retrievers come from source, parts of your personality to help you along the way. At the end of the day, what I was shocked most about when you die, there's a lot of choices, there's a lot of options. It's a long menu.
Do you believe that your ability to make those choices and to pick your options are based off of your narrative here in the physical world?
Yeah, I don't think you make the best choices unless you have um, an open mind. Let's say if you're heavily indoctrinated into a certain religion, you're going to like show up there into a consensus reality with other heavily indoctrinated, religions, and have like an earth life experience. And you're not getting the full picture, basically.
So
I,
do you think that then based on world religions such as Islam, Judaism and Christianity, if I pass and at that time I'm passing and my belief system is my faith and my belief system is absolute around my religious belief system, will that interpret itself into the afterlife?
yep,
So
absolutely. It's
so if
like,
I'm Christian, I will meet Jesus.
You're not exactly going to meet Jesus, okay? You're going to meet, it's more thought responsive. You might create almost an illusion of a religious figure when you go there. It's more illusionary, it's more thought responsive. Is it actually Jesus? I don't think so. But it's like a belief system territory in the astral or the non-physical world. There are thousands, probably millions of these places. You know, you think how big the universe is. Okay, let me put it this way. The universe is ginormous. Non-physical reality is in the same space, shall we say, but a different dimension. So think how big the universe is, and it dwarfs compared to what the afterlife options are.
Got it. But you mentioned that while in the afterlife, you experienced a space in where all your other identities existed, both male
Yes,
and female. And
yes,
there you actually touched both a male and a female version,
yes.
getting a glimpse of who they were. Do you think that those bodies were there as a remnant slash like dormitory state of life, or were they themselves still experiencing active consciousness?
I think they had definitely had active consciousness, but it was right before I went to source. I mean, I was out of body and I looked back and I saw this big blue ball. I guess it was the earth. I'm just guessing. And I thought to myself, you know, I really hate heights, Chris. And I wasn't afraid. And that was my first thought. Anyways, um, then I was led or guided to this like cathedral. And there was that line of males, line of females, and I brushed my hand. And I still had hands. I was still me. I still felt like I had a physical body, but it was different. And I went on one side, and this man was there, and middle-aged, not too attractive. And then I saw a female, and it was to explain to me, these are your past lives.
Let me just catch on to what you just said. So,
Yeah.
what you're saying is that while the soul sparks off in fragments at different times, places, you yourself as an individual spark keep reincarnating as your individual spark. And those bodies that you encountered in that dimension or that hallway, as you refer to it, were actually your personal reincarnations or incarnations.
Incarnations, I wouldn't say reincarnation. Yeah, that was me. And I can't imagine my life as ever being male. Kind of freaks me out.
Well, so do you think that upon, like, let's just say you have to reincarnate again? Do you think that
I don't think reincarnation is what, you know, the terms. I think we've already done it. It's all okay. I think it all happens instantaneous. The splitting of the soul and going into different dimensions at different times, maybe you're born in the 1700s, maybe you're born in 2525. I think it happens all at once. So we've had this term in the English language, reincarnation, like you die and you come back. I don't think it's quite like that.
I
I
guess
think
I guess
happens
what
all
I'm
at
trying to do is
once.
oversimplify it for people because the
Yeah.
complexity of your story is vast, but I think that there is a fundamental understanding that we can wrap around this, which is that
Okay.
what you're saying is that you, as Laura, when you passed, you went through this hole that
Mhm.
uh, entombed all of your previous incarnations
Mhm.
that were of you yourself,
Mhm.
or of, because
Yes.
remember what you said, that there is other people,
No,
other
it was
so
me.
okay, so it was you, your specific spark. Those were the bodies that your specific spark embodied.
Yeah, and they were still individuals.
That's wild, isn't it? Like, that's a really hard thing to kind of.
It it's mind-boggling, but it was actually very calming and it made sense. There was a logic that I possessed in non-physical reality that I didn't carry back with me. There was a lot more. I was more logical in my thinking and less emotional, but I still was freaked out. I still thought, wow, I've done this so many times. I must be a failure. I'm not getting what I need. I mean, like I'm like failed human life a few times. That's what I thought at the time. Now I see that it was just it was beautiful, the thought that I've done this. I've been the hero. I've been the villain. You play every role. That's what's so freaky. You've been the hero, the victim, the villain, the inventor, the physically challenged, the mentally challenged, the mentally ill, the average. You've led a vanilla life. I mean, you've been a parent, a leader, you've had many, many roles. So this is how you're gathering your information. There was a logic to it that I understood while I was there, but there was also part of me that is still Lura and had a hard time absorbing it. The cool part is I'm glad that I'm able to tell somebody, and not keep it in. It's hard to keep these things in. For 30 years, I would have these dreams about my near-death experience. So it's a good thing to share.
Okay, so let's just take you. So you, Laura, you pass, you go to the afterlife, right? While you're in the afterlife, there's many chambers. I'm going to use the word chamber, but
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
So there's many chambers, and as you're passing through these chambers, one of the chambers actually houses the bodies of incarnations, of your personal incarnations. Now, what I'm trying to understand was, are those incarnations that you encountered dormitory, or are they actually moving in source? Because again, why are they in a chamber, not actually going?
They're very close to source. They're very close or part of source. Okay, so I was shown a fragment of it. Also, that chamber looked like an echo of source. Now, I never really explained it. It was almost like a V shape like this as it was going down, and I could not see the end of the bodies. Okay, I didn't see the end. I mean, I could estimate that was about 75 souls on this side, 75 or 80 on this side, but I couldn't see the end of it. But it was the color, that bright, luminous, the ceiling. It would look like the image that I carried from source. And the souls were all a luminous white. These individuals who are part of me, part of the spark of my source, were very close to source. So they've probably been taken out of consensus reality and they're moving back to source. At the same time, they could very well be in a consensus reality, living out a life. That's very possible. I don't know. What I do know is that they were still individuals, still responsive towards me, but on such a deeper level that the communication was almost absent.
But they were aware of you just as you were aware of them?
Absolutely.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Absolutely.
I thought this was more like a whole, and like my visual effect here was male, female, and you
Yes.
walking down a row of that and looking at all of these different, and I was like, well, are they like trophy? You know what I mean? Like a trophy case kind of is the vision that I got from hearing you tell the story, but that's not actually what you're saying.
I think they were trying to show me something I could understand, something I could comprehend at my level at this time in my life.
Got it. Got it.
I think there's so much more to it that I'm not able to comprehend. Remember, they could have been from anywhere. They could have been in source, floating in that sea of love, come out, lined up, just to show me how many lives is male, how many females. So the guide that I had that was standing before was trying to explain. When I looked over and saw that whole row, that this was my life as a human being, as male, and this was my life, past lives or other lives, as female, and there were two distinct rows. It was a lesson and an explanation to me, probably from me.
But either way, each one of those embodiments, and yourself included, are just a fragment of the overarching source that you're coming from.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So it's this weird thing where you're kind of presenting us with, hey, there is individuality, but there's not individuality. The individuality essentially is an illusion. Yeah? Because we're
Yes.
all, so would it be, again, just based off of now being able to pick your brain, because it's hard when I was listening to your interviews, I wasn't able to pick your brain as you were speaking
Right.
about your experience. So what I'm doing now is picking your brain based off of
Good.
the experience that you told in other interviews.
Okay.
And what I'm really trying to, I guess, essentially get at, and was a question kind of before, is that what you're saying is that there is an overarching source where everything is coming from. So there is one soul, but that
Yes.
one soul is then on another level, like kind of like a pyramid, almost like a pyramid scheme, where you have source at the top and then you have individual source that breaks itself down. And so you get to, like you said, the outer layer of this orange, where we are experiencing individual life on a physical level. So there
Yes.
are levels and layers. So after we leave this physical reality, it's not like we're just going right back to source. We actually are still
No.
going and climbing the
Yes,
source ladder.
you're saying it better than I could. When you leave your physical body, you go into your second body, and your second body is a complete duplicate of your physical body, except you're young. You're at your, let's say I'm 65 now, and if I died tomorrow, I'd go into my second body and it would be probably 19 or 25 years old, the best version of me. But it would still be me, and I would still have arms and legs. As I progressed into astral, the different layers that you go up, while you're climbing the pyramid, um, I'm still going to be me, but a less dense version of myself.
Laura, can I ask you this question as you're saying this? So, one of the things that is a hobby of mine is I'm an artist. I like to draw, I like to paint, I like to do all of these
Mhm.
things. Would you say that similar to how I create paintings and things like that, Source is creating us on an individual level? And then, like, what do you do with all of your paintings, right? You keep them all lined up and stacked up, and they stay that way. Do you think that we are just acting as like a kind of an artistic expression to some degree of our original source? Again, so many different ways of experiencing so many different things at so many times. It seems artistic to some degree.
Oh, I think it's exquisite teaching mechanism that we have when we come in. It's just the most exquisite school that we're going to learn so much. Even if you have a short life, there's value and richness in it. But the I've talked to other people that have near-death experiences, and we all have trouble articulating. How can you explain the unexplainable to somebody who hasn't had it? But you get that aha moment once in a while when somebody gets it. You really get it. I'm so relieved because you're asking such intelligent questions, such questions I'd want to know. It's just sometimes it's hard for me to verbalize it. I'm reaching for words because it was so powerful. It was so unlike physical reality, and I felt wonderful.
I haven't run into such a tricky story yet in my life. So that's why, again, thank you so much for allowing me to pick your brain here and try to actually filter out information, because I think that there's things here that are not commonly spoken about in the New Age and religious communities. This is not a narrative that's normally talked about in this depth and like trying to get precise, which is where I'm really enjoying going with you here. So
Okay.
there are many afterlife experiences people tell of, and there are many differentiating narratives. People speak of a light and a tunnel, others say nothing happens, others speak of Christ coming to them, even saving them from hell. What do you make of all these varying experiences, especially in comparison to yours? Because yours seems to have a lot of practicality and things we can learn and extract from.
Well, I respect everybody's point of view in their and talking about their near-death experience. I'm certainly not an expert on it. I can tell you what happened to me, but I also realize that Mm, there are some people out there that maybe are less than altruistic about their recounting their near-death experiences. Some people that have an agenda, financial agenda. So, we have to pick and choose who we listen to and who we believe that are talking about their near-death experiences. Um,
So you're saying that it's possible too, which is the most reasonable thing, is that people are just kind of BSing. Not everyone, not everyone.
Yeah.
Not everyone. No, no, no.
It's a
But
great way to grab at attention. It's a great way to make yourself feel important and special, right?
yeah.
I want to say something, and I want to say it with compassion. There are some good people out there that are misguided. Do I believe every near-death experience that I heard from people? No, nobody should take it verbatim. I think if somebody doesn't have an agenda, you know, listen to them and then take what you think is honest. But I host my own show, and I've been approached by people, and I've talked to them, and they've told me about their near-death experience, and some of them I didn't really believe.
Yeah. Your BS radar goes off.
Yeah, and if none of us are superhuman, and we don't come back with psychic abilities after near death. You may have a pinch of psychic abilities after near death experience, but nobody's got a full cup.
Have people called BS on you?
Yeah, yeah, somebody said, well, I'm not buying it. You should have seen, a religious thing and stuff. I said, well, I'm telling you what happened to me. You want to believe me? Fine. If you don't, fine. I don't care. Uh,
Are you trying to convince
No,
anybody of anything, or if
I'm
you
not
believe me or
recruiting.
don't, whatever?
I'm not recruiting anybody. You can, I just want to, I'm hoping to reach somebody like me that's had one, that really struggled after it. I had nobody to talk to for years, nobody. And it was isolating, and it felt awful that I couldn't share it with. I mean, I would talk to my sister about it, but I felt so isolated and alone after my near-death experience. It took me years to come to terms with it. But I was a kid, and it was a different time, and there was no internet. So I'd like to give some clarity about it. That's why I've talked about it.
I don't know if you agree with this sentiment, but I find that the more someone tries to get you to believe their narrative, the less they believe in their own narrative. I don't know if that's something that resonates with
Oh,
you.
I think so. I think so.
If you're trying so desperately and so hard to get me to believe what you believe, probably means you don't believe it so much yourself.
Or it didn't happen.
Or that's going to justify your own belief system. The
Hmm.
more people that believe what you believe, the more justification there is in believing what you believe.
Yeah, it's sort of like a cat chasing its tail.
Yeah, I mean, if you're confident and you're comfortable with your, like, I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything ever. I have no reason to.
Yeah, and what happened to me is like, yeah, I had the near-death experience. Did it make me a better person? Probably not. Just a little bit more informed, and a lot more grateful.
Again, what my goal was here was to try to articulate it in a little bit more of a structured way, as opposed to just the storyline of it. And one of the things that I took from what you were saying in other interviews is you were talking about our acts and our actions and our deeds and things like that, and how we're going to experience that in the plane that we elevate to after the physical death. But do you
Yeah.
think that our acts here in the world of in any way affect life after death, meaning that what type of caliber of individual I am? Because like you said, everyone's got to play different parts: the villain, the hero, X, Y, and Z. It doesn't seem to make relative sense that, okay, if the soul needs to experience all of those different um, sentiments, right, and I'm just lucky that I don't have to be the villain in my overarching scheme of things. What happens to the villain version of myself versus the best version of myself? Is there a difference in the result of going into the afterlife?
Oh yeah. Okay. Let's say you're a really crappy person.
What do
And
you mean by that first? What do you mean by really crappy person?
No, a person that hurts others, that tramples over. When you trample over somebody and you interrupt their destiny, let's say you're a wife beater, or I've always said that if you are a politician and caused people's death, or you're a gangster and you or a criminal or something, and you do some really, really cruel things to other people, to innocent people. I've always said this, if you, let's say, work for a company and you sell a terrible product and it hurts people, it causes, gives them an illness or it causes their death, there's an accountability for people like that. You don't go up to source quickly. You are going to stay in the lower rings.
But Laura, isn't source putting you in that position to gain that information that you need from that spot? Why is there why is there repercussion?
There's always the wild card. You have a choice to be a good person. Each individual has a responsibility. You could have two twins in terrible circumstances. One becomes, a pretty good person, doesn't hurt anybody. The other one becomes a really, really bad person and, shoots people in a robbery. Just because source is the ultimate doesn't mean that there are some bad outcomes.
Doesn't source need the bad
rings.
outcomes? That's my question. Doesn't source
Yeah.
need the bad outcomes in order to pull and extract that information?
Maybe. I don't know.
So if I'm sent here to do that job, to get that information, and then I bring it back as was my purpose, why would there be a delay in my elevation for doing my job?
I don't know, but I can tell you I've passed through the lower rings, outside of physical reality. And I wouldn't want to stop there.
So again, you're saying that essentially we have a choice when we come here to what paths we're going to kind of move.
Yes.
But you also mentioned that we might have lives where we're physically or mentally handicapped.
Yes.
Right. Well, there's not a lot of choice in that. What if we come with a mental deficiency or a mental handicap, like schizophrenia or something to that degree, and then we do harm based off of the mental handicap that we're coming in with? Do you still think that there's a price to pay?
I don't think it's a price to pay. I think that's a question that I don't know. I'm guessing. I think there's an accountability. That's a good question. That's bigger than my little brain. All I know is that when I have traveled through those rings, there's some in the lower rings, there's some undesirable souls that I wouldn't want to encounter. Not like monsters or boogeymen, but some people that just are not, they weren't good people here. They're not good people there, perhaps yet. But I wouldn't want to stop in the lower rings.
Yeah, the logical side of my brain is trying to make heads or tails of this, because one of the things that you can run into very, very typically with, let's just say, we'll use a Catholic priest for the example, right? Mm-hmm. The Catholic priest, let's just say, God forbid, they're a pedophile, right? You have a Catholic priest who's a pedophile. In the religious frame, his sins will be forgiven as long as he accepts Christ. And it could even be at the last moment of his death. And he did horrible, terrible things to so many people, like you were kind of saying. And then in the process of that, again, speaking in the terms of Christianity, let's just say that I've lived my whole life well and good and tried to follow the teachings of Christ, but I don't accept Christ as God. According to the priest, he will get into heaven and I'm going to have to stand on the outsides of the gates and get sent down to hell, right? This is according to their standard, right? Yeah. Which again is completely nonsense. This is just justification and a backdoor for people to be assholes. Excuse my language, and then justify their wayward behavior. Well, Jesus will save me. Of course, I made mistakes. Of course, I'm a sinner. I'm making mistakes, but I accept Jesus, and Jesus will forgive me. And this is a way of people justifying their wayward behavior. But at the same time, my understanding, and it even is now, is that one, I love your way of explaining that you are going to be judged on your deeds, your decisions, because the only thing we're afforded is our choices, is our decision making, right? Free will is the only thing we have. We have no control over anything other than my ability to make my own decisions. That's what we got. There's nothing else on the table other than that. Now, if I'm taking that standard and saying, okay, my ability to make good decisions and correct decisions is going to determine how dirty I actually get myself, right? So what I'm trying to get to, I guess, is let's just say we have human A who is doing really, really, really good things, and then human B who is doing very, very bad things, depending on what your definition of that is. Human B who's doing the bad things is going to get very dirty. And when they go back up, they need to get cleaned. Would you say that this is there's a cleansing process that needs to happen? The dirtier you are, the more sin or bad deeds that you have when you go up. All that stuff needs to be scrubbed clean. So I would say, and I don't know if you're on board with this, that it's not necessarily a judgment or a punishment. It's a cleaning. It's a cleansing, a scrubbing.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's very logical. I have to say something that's pretty unpopular. I don't organized religion was all written by man. Okay, I had to let go of my preconceived notions of organized religion. What I take from organized Judeo-Christian religion is the good ethics of kindness, of love, of being spiritual. The rest I've kind of left alone. I've let go of, and it's been better. It'll make my transition better if I don't take the man-made preconceived notions. Somebody that dies that just said, hey, I accept Jesus before that, death, and they weren't a good person. That doesn't fly with me.
Yeah. I mean, just to be clear about this, because again, you don't want anybody to get upset or offended.
Yeah, sorry, it's just not my truth.
No, it's not mine either. I'm with you. I'm not going to pretend anything that's not true to me. But at the same time, it's like, here's the thing. If you, I have many friends and many who will come to me and tell me, Chris, you really need to accept Christ because I'm worried about your salvation. I've heard that in my direction many times. And I said, really focus on your own salvation. You don't have to worry about me and my salvation. And the thing is that when they're coming and they're in that mind, I don't judge them. I'm not judging them. I'm not saying, hey, you're wrong. My way is right. Your way is right. I never do that to anybody ever. You're allowed to think and feel the way you think. And I respect that.
We're all on our own spiritual path, and I respect anybody else's path. For me, I like to take the good things out of Judeo-Christian, their ethics, and that's what I carry with me, and it's very heartwarming. The organized religion, not so much, but more power to somebody who is a part of it. There's so many more questions I had than answers after my near-death experience. There's so much more out there that I find very exciting, and it's going to be an amazing journey when we transition, the continuation of life. But as far as if you've been a bad person, you don't get a free hall pass when you die.
Well, I love the idea that whatever you've done that's hurtful, I mean, I think even including to yourself.
Oh yeah, I have made mistakes so big you could drive a truck through the middle of them and not hit the sides. I made colossal mistakes in my life, which I wish I could do over, but all I can do is try to learn from them and go on.
Well, that cleansing process that I'm talking about is in direct correlation to what you were saying, which is that when you elevate, when you leave the physical body and you go to the afterlife, whatever that might be, you are actually responsible for everything you did here to yourself, to others, in both directions, good and bad. And I think that cleansing process that I'm talking about is that the more bad you did, the more you're going to have to experience all of the pain and suffering that you caused in the world. So that's really the detail. And then once you've experienced all of it from A to Z, I think then if you become even keeled. That's my understanding anyway.
I hope so.
I don't know, but I hope so.
I want to touch real quick on the concept of reincarnation, because we've been there, we've touched on it a little bit more, but I would really like to get your oversimplified version of what reincarnation actually means. Is there a means to an end, or is it just this endless cycle? Do we just keep coming and coming? And what is the means to the end there? Is there a means? And how do we get to that means?
Right. Well, I don't think you do it endlessly, but I think you kind of cycle out of physical reality by becoming aware and being able to go through let's say this is physical reality. You're able to go through the layers or levels of consensus reality, the lower rings, and then the higher thought responsive realities until source. So eventually all your lives, all your incarnations are working, traveling towards getting back to source. And I think that there is an end to it.
So
Um,
one of the fragments is going to break that cycle, is what you're saying.
yeah,
It only takes
somebody's come
one.
become
One of your personalities is the personality that becomes aware. If I've done anything in this life, the accomplishment as Laura that I've taken out of this life is I became aware. That is my biggest accomplishment that I've ever done, is I became aware of the afterlife. I'll take that with me, that knowledge. Maybe I'll be a big helper on the other side. I don't know.
I have a question that's going to go off beat from where we just were.
sure.
So in this idea of, how do I end my cycle? Because if you go into the Vedas, if you go into all kinds of tractate, it's clear that there is a cycle, and we are trying to get ourselves out of the cycle through self-realization. That's why you have organizations like Self-Realization Fellowship,
Yeah.
the Hare Krishna movement, Shakyamuni Buddhism, all of these different things, Kabbalah. And what winds up happening here is that I feel like we're presented with this, how do I say this? This saturation of desire. So the question, let me read the question as I actually wrote it, because now my thinking is changing.
Okay.
What is the purpose of self-indulgent pleasure, such as sex, drugs, and food? And what is the ideal relationship we should have with it?
Well, I think everything in moderation, you don't want to become a drug addict or obese or get a social disease. But I think, while you're here in the physical, have a good time. I mean, if you want to sleep around, just be safe. If you want to have desserts, just don't eat too many. Drugs aren't good for you. I wouldn't advocate for that, but a glass of wine once in a while wouldn't hurt you. I think that people can get addicted to these
Sense
things.
pleasures.
That's not good. But unfortunately, if you don't beat your addiction to like alcohol or drugs, you're taking your problems with you. You're still you when you die. So those problems, you work out your crap or your human foibles while you're alive as best you can, because you're taking your problems with you. There are great places of healing in the afterlife, great helpers that help you heal, like almost like a hospital, like an institution. But I'd rather do my recovery work while I'm in the physical, so that when I'm in the non-physical, I can excel.
Personally.
Do you think that the sense pleasures that we have here in this world translate to the afterlife in any which way, shape, or form?
Oh, I don't think, well, the addiction is going to be there. Let's say you're an alcoholic, you're going to have to sober up. Are you going to be drinking alcohol in the afterlife? No. Are you going to be having sex in the afterlife? No, not really. But
So the sense pleasures that we experience in relation to
Mhm.
the body, which also have an emotional and a psychological effect on us as well, not just physical,
Yeah.
also spiritual even. People who are taking certain drugs and hallucinogens are having psychedelic experiences, which they relate to spiritual experiences. I'm not personally doing that, so I don't know the full details there, but it is a
Yeah.
narrative that's on the table. And I guess my question is that you painted a picture for us that was like very much like you're going to this world that is very much like the world that we're currently in, only there's the removal of pain, death, and suffering, right?
yes, but you can go past those levels. Let me also explain something that might be helpful. When you die, it's very important to let go. Let go of physical reality and try to travel as far as you can to get into a consensus reality that's maybe more enlightened. If you've lived in New Jersey, you don't want another New Jersey when you die, and in that consensus reality, you want to kind of go and progress and go to your higher self as much as possible. Once you're at your higher self, you can go back into the consensus reality. There's a lot more freedom when you die than you realize. You can, make pit stops and go visit people that are in different consensus realities. I know some of what I say is disjointed. It's just so hard to express how vast it all is. The glimpse I had into the non-physical was quick. It didn't last very long, but the lasting impression changed my belief systems, my core values. There's just a lot more going on in the non-physical that's than I could actually express.
It seems from your narrative that the layers of consciousness that exist bleed into each other and that we experience that. So one of the things that I kind of heard from you going forward, because I don't want to go too deep into the narrative, people can find it in many other interviews,
Sure.
is are we technically experiencing other realities and different layers of consciousness here now in the physical reality?
Yeah, when you sleep, you can leave your body and go into what's quote unquote the astral. I think most of us do that in our deep sleep. You can also do meditation tapes that can help facilitate out of body experience. They're just real tough to do. You know, you can do them like 50 times in a row and only had one successful thing. But it is possible to get some of your own answers yourself and not to rely on other people. I think that's a good direction to take, but it's just not an easy thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess my question, just going back to my question a little bit, maybe I'll simplify it more. Uh, do you think that it's possible for me to have, because people use the word guides, guardian angels, things like that. Do you think it's possible that in my state, because here's something that happens to me. Let me use this as an example.
Okay.
I'll be driving down the road. I'll pass something, a garbage in the street, let's just say, dead animal on the side of the road, so there's some, and whatever it might be. And as I'm driving past that, a voice in my head goes, "You need to stop and handle that." Now, the rational side of myself is like, keep driving. But as I drive further and further, that gets more gnawing, and I eventually have to turn myself around and go handle whatever it was that I saw. What do you think that force actually is? Because it's something that happens to me on a regular basis. I could be walking in a park and see garbage on the floor. It's not my garbage. I didn't put it there. But something my conscious, I guess, is like pick that up and throw that out.
I think that you're getting a little guidance. I think there's that inner gut feeling sometimes that is not of our origin. I think there is a lot more guidance and helpers helping you through your life than you realize. I don't believe in angels, but I do know that there's other souls that are coming in and help us from time to time. Sometimes we can perceive them, other times we can't. Other times it's just like random and weird stuff. But let me just say, when I was sick one time, very, very ill, and my grandfather came to me, walked right in my room, put his hand over
Your
my
grandfather who
abdomen.
had already passed.
Yeah, he died when I was 12. And he said, your spleen. And then he dissolved. Well, long story short, I finally made it to a doctor who'd listened to me. Had a splenectomy. It was a horrible operation, but my spleen had hemorrhaged and I was hours or just days away from death. So there is intervention sometimes. Someone that you love or a helper that you don't know that you're connected to can come in and give you valuable information, or they can, give you with thought, don't drive down this street or something like that. There is some intervening sources and guidance that you have.
That are
If
popping
you
those
had a-
thoughts into your head?
Yeah. And if you've had a near-death experience, you're a little more open to it and it happens a little more often. But other people that think that was just some sort of weird intuition, no, there was some helpers.
Yeah.
Which
There's
is
there's
comforting
also
and wonderful.
anti-helpers, no?
Pardon?
There's also anti-help. For
No,
example,
there's not the boogeyman
no,
out
no, no,
there.
not the
There's
boogeyman. Not demons, not the boogeyman. I'm not talking about anything like that. So you don't think that there's negative frequencies or negative vibrations that are affecting us in negative
I
ways?
think there's negative people that have passed over, that are just not too happy about it, like bad people. But I don't think they're a big influence on our lives.
So I totally off topic and not on my list of questions. So then how do you explain this huge narrative around exorcisms? What is your take? Your take. I'm not saying I need you to be a factual.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not the expert, but
What's your take?
I no, I don't, it's not possible to possess somebody. It is just isn't possible. If you leave your body, during a near-death experience or out-of-body experience. Nobody else is getting in your body. I don't think that there's no demons, there's no boogeyman, there's no monsters, and the exorcisms.
You're not
I'm
buying
not
it.
buying it.
Did you experience emotion? You said, because I know you've experienced, you kind of, the way you laid out your story, you did experience like an emotional roller coaster in the afterlife.
Oh, yeah.
So there's an emotional body that's going with the spiritual body as well, yeah?
Yeah, and you're still you. I thought like a 19-year-old when I was going through my near-death experience, and there was an emotional. It was gut-wrenching coming back and leaving my grandfather. It was gut-wrenching coming back into physical reality, and I was pretty ticked off about it. And I looked around the field when I was awoke, and I said to myself, this is not reality. And I was not a happy camper for about 12 hours till I calmed down.
Yeah. Well,
You take it very emotional.
is there a positive and negative emotion? Are you feeling sadness while you're there too?
Yeah, I was 19 and I had just begun to live. I couldn't comprehend that I had died.
So again, just to kind of get to my point, so the only thing that's essentially changing is the removal of the physical body. You still have emotional body,
Yes.
you have spirit,
Yes.
and you also have a thought process. You have a consciousness as well.
Yes.
The only thing that's removed from life in this dimension to the next is the physical body.
Yes, and I was in a second body, a perfect replica of my physical body. Only
that is not subject to disease and.
Yeah, and also and the longer you're dead, it goes from having pigment to no pigment.
So from dense to less dense.
Yeah. I felt my body as I was rushing, like, you feel like you're rushing when you're going through these layers. It's really feels great. I felt a sense of having, fingers, toes, body, limbs. And then when I was in source, I don't think I had a physical body. Perhaps I was a point of consciousness as I was floating through source. That's what it felt like, because I didn't have a feeling of having shoulders or a head or anything like that. I think I was probably a point of consciousness.
What kind of trailing off of that, what do you think creates this reality that we're in? Since life can be very difficult and painful, what purpose do you think suffering serves from the perspective of the creative force? So, one, what is creating this reality, and why create this reality? Why pain and suffering are introduced, and what purpose does that serve?
It's my belief that God has created this reality. I do believe in a creator. I do believe in God, very, very much so. And put us in this exquisite learning system, Earth, physical reality. I don't like the pain and the suffering that go on and the cruelty at all. I question the logic of that, but I didn't create it. So, I mean, it's a tough school. It's pretty brutal down here a lot of the time.
For what,
I don't
in your
get it.
opinion, just in your opinion, I'm not asking you to give me factual
Uh-huh.
information, but to what's the purpose? What do you think the purpose serves?
I think that we are here to learn lessons to, develop the ability of love and compassion is so urgently needed in this world. And
But
I
this
don't know.
world is just an illusion, a school like you were referring to. It's just an
Yeah,
illusion.
it
It's a
is.
school. So what is the necessity of doing? This is just a place we're coming as a visitor to gain information and bring data back to source, right? And from your narrative and many other narratives that I've come in contact with, I've kind of put together this idea, and I just would like to get your take on it. Do you think that what's happening is that there is a data collection going on? We, as these manifestations or whatever it is, are literally just miners of data, and we're taking that data back to this quote unquote source, or our source, as a refinement, right? It's refining data is essentially what it is. And what's trying, what source, our individual source, as you explained it, not the creative source, but our individual source, what it's trying to do is it's trying to elevate its vibration to a higher source itself. So is it possible that our source is actually trying to get itself as a collective up to another source? And this is what I was talking about, the pyramid scheme. Am I clear, or am I being confusing?
No, I understand exactly what you're saying. It could be. I've never gone that far out or don't know. Okay, let's say when all my personalities go through the life system and I'm back at source, the whole band's there. What happens after that? I've got no freaking idea. I think raising over the vibrational level sounds very logic, but I don't know what happens after that at all.
Also, again, you were only showed a glimpse and came back with a skeleton. So the information that
Yes.
we're able to get from your narrative is also very limited, based on
Yes.
what you were able to retain and come back. And like you said, as you've been going on through life, you're getting little glimpses here, snippets that kind of come swooping back in, little pieces of the puzzle here and there. So you could,
And help.
essentially get way more
Yeah.
information by the time, your life ends here.
Yeah, and I've had like I always say I have a cheerleading team on the other side because as in my late teens I got autoimmune disease and had been in and out of hospitals for many years and had some help, and then when I've wanted help I've got none. So there was no absolute logic or rhythm to it. It's just been very random.
Well. Let me ask you this: what do you think is the effect of? I know, kind of going left field real quick. What do you think
Okay.
is the effect of prayer? What do you think is actually happening when we pray, and who slash what are we praying to? Is anybody listening? Like if I,
Yes.
okay,
Yes. When you are praying, when your prayers are sincere, let's say you're praying for a sick child, and it's raising a vibrational level. Okay, you are sending out like a beacon, just going off and into the astral, like notifying other helpers. Prayer is very powerful. You are raising your vibrational level. Let's say there's 50 people praying for this sick kid. Prayer matters, and also that vibrational level is reaching that person and helping them on a different non-physical level. So prayer is very important, to have a sincere, kind prayer, and as well as good intentions. I am not a goody two shoes Pollyanna type person. I have a potty mouth. I sometimes have a bad temper, and I'm certainly not a saint. But I do realize, to try to, when I kind of go off the rails, to try to reset my intention, to try to raise my vibrational help, by asking for help, by asking for prayer and asking for guidance. And I do sincerely pray for people that I know that are in need, and I hope that that does raise a vibrational level and does affect them.
do you think that the power of prayer is more exceptional when it's vocalized, or can it be thought consciousness? Same.
I think saying it out loud sets your intention a little bit better. If you're praying silently, you know, don't pray for a parking space when you're at the mall. Uh, save it for the big things. And when someone is really, in your life that is very negative, sometimes it doesn't hurt to pray for them, or to have a good thought towards them to offset their negative. It sounds very Pollyanna-ish, but
No,
Yeah.
that's the gig. I think that those people who show up in our lives as antagonists are there to provide us with that resource.
yeah. And don't, it's also, I always say, don't bat the beehive. Don't confront, somebody is negative and they're just like awful to be around. You don't engage with them, just disengage and get away from them. It's never our responsibility to fix other people. We are responsible for ourselves. So, you don't have to be a good doer, a goody two shoes, after a near-death experience, but you just, there's people you avoid and there's people you gravitate. Try to gravitate towards the better people. You'll be happier in the end.
Boom.
You know, I get negative people out of my life. If I perceive somebody as negative, it's just like, I don't have time for that. I'm not there to fix them, nor they are there to fix me.
I agree with your narrative, which is that the most powerful prayer is in a direction that is disassociated with yourself. For example, I'll just give you one instance for me. Recently, I was at Great Adventure in New Jersey. They have this theme park called Great Adventure. And while I was there, I saw a young girl who was with her mother and her father, and she was visibly sick, probably going through cancer. I also went through cancer 4 years ago.
Sorry.
No, nothing to be sued. Part of the deal, right?
Yeah.
Part of the deal, But anyway, but it heightened my sensitivity towards it because I went through it. So I saw this girl at Great Adventure, and my whole world just became zoned in and focused on this young girl who I saw. And, it's one of those things where I'd like to tell people that if you can get yourself into that state of mind where you care about that person so much that you are not willing to let go of it, I think this really raises your own personal vibration on a very high scale. So I think that the value in prayer also is there when you attach yourself to somebody who has nothing to do with you. You have no responsibility or obligation to that person, but you choose to care for no reason whatsoever. And then you beg the universe to come in and care for that person as well. It allows that to happen. Hey, if I care for no reason, shouldn't other forces that are not associated with this care for no reason too? Am I onto something there, you think?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Yeah.
Well, so piggybacking off of that, what do you think is happening when we sleep? What are dreams? You touched on it lightly, but what do you think that the dreams are? And even further, I'm going to go into that, which number one, I do want to get your take on what's happening when we sleep and what do you think dreams are? But what makes you sure that your experience, your NDE, wasn't actually similar to a dream state?
Well, the difference is you're sitting in a desert. Then suddenly someone throws you into the Atlantic Ocean. That's the difference. That's the day and night. When you're out of body, no dream could be that intense. No vision your vision and colors, sensation is so much more intense. There's no comparison. Your hearing, your senses are so heightened. It's just day and night. So it couldn't be a dream. So a near-death experience is so crisp and vivid that the memories of it 45 years later seem like it happened 15 minutes ago. It imprints in you in a way that a dream could never. When you go to bed at night, and you sleep and you go into that deep, deep sleep, people detach from their bodies and go into the astral state. It's a normal thing. Everybody does it. Most people, you can't remember it, but, you do traveling and have encounters, and it's...
With what dimensional
Very
plane?
limited.
Is it a plane of consciousness that you're creating or sub-creating?
No, I don't think you're creating it. I think you drift out of your body. Some people do. Maybe not everybody. I don't know. I just think that it's a huge possibility for everybody.
So
I know,
where
I
do
have
the
done it.
nightmares, so if you, where does the nightmare experience then come into play?
Well, you have regular dreams in a certain phase of your sleep. I used to dream about wearing my pajamas to school. When I was a little kid, you have things that you work out in your conscious mind in a dream state. You just have regular dreams. Then you can have an out-of-body lucid dream and become very awake. A small percentage of the population have lucid dreams where you're in a dream state, it's crisp and vivid, and then you actually wake up and have a consciousness during that. A lot of people have had near-death experience are able to lucid dream. I'm a lucid dreamer.
Yeah.
It's weird. You don't work anything out in a lucid dream, but it's pretty cool.
So you spoke of seeing your grandfather after death and imply that one will be reunited with their loved ones, including pets, in the afterlife. A question that arose for me was, and this is a little complicated, what if you're divorced and do not get along with your ex-spouse or your spouse at that time, but you share children, what would how would that work? Was there like a joint custody after death? Like how will broken families be reunited in death?
I'd like to think that there's a lot more forgiveness on the other side. When you have your life review, think about this. You're going to see exactly how you interacted with that spouse. And maybe you're going to get a greater understanding of that person. And there might be a lot more forgiveness. I don't think there's so much marriage in the afterlife. I think there's more of a coexistence in a, let's say you're in a consensus reality. Well, those children that you share are going to be adults. They may join you in that consensus reality. They may not, or they may drift in and out. There's a lot more visiting that goes on. I know that my mother teamed up or found her best friend in after death, which made me feel good because I had a joint visitation from both of them. I've had some very unique things that have added to my afterlife beliefs, but not given me any like clear answers, just a general idea.
Yeah, I can also, without going into detail, confirm what you're saying about visitation from the other side, and again, I don't want to go into detail and get personal, but I will say that for sure there is that possibility, and it's not a forced situation. From my
Right.
experience, it's one that if you're open to it, it can happen.
Yeah.
If you are closed to it, it's not going to happen. In my personal opinion and experience.
Listen, if I was psychic enough to get the lottery numbers, I'd do it. If I was psychic enough to go to Vegas and make money, oh my gosh, I'd do it. I wish I could get answers. Occasionally, I've been had visitations from loved ones that have passed. Haven't been able to keep a connection for very long because we're both on different vibrational levels. But it's been comforting to know that, they exist and that your pets exist. So I hope that I answer that, yes, there are your pets in your afterlife. Yes, they have their own little journey, their souls themselves. I hope that makes somebody feel good.
Well, I think more what I was asking is, and again, I understand that you don't have facts around this stuff, but you do have experience that I don't have. So I guess what my question was is, let's just say that, I'm married and me and my wife divorce and we go separate ways. And let's just say it's even amicable. In the afterlife, God for, going down the line, let's say you have children together and your children pass. Do you get reunited with your children?
Oh, absolutely.
So would the so like let's just say your child passes and you're waiting, like your grandfather was there to receive you, right? Will who how do you decide? Is it based off the person and what the person wants? Like let's just say that for me, I don't get along with my father, right? And my father passes, and when I go up, I don't want to see my father. I don't want to.
You don't have to.
Thing I can tell you that's universal in a consensus reality, you're not going to impose your presence on somebody that doesn't want to be around you. Let's say if you have very bitter feelings towards a cousin, you don't have to team up and see each other. It doesn't work like that. If there's people you want to avoid, you'll avoid them. But also that person that maybe has been the sand in the oyster does turn out to be a pearl. Maybe there is some forgiveness. I'd like to think so. And a little less of I think you can lessen your load of conflict as you progress through the different dimensions too.
Yeah, I would ask. Do you think that love? Because do you think that love is the binding factor there?
Oh, absolutely.
So love transcends time, space, and motion. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Love is the tremendous, most powerful, significant thing there really is.
I'd like to get your take on this because I have my own understanding around love because I think it's one of those words that's used so frequently. People use it like it's going out of style. but I don't think many people understand what love actually really means. I think that most people associate love with emotional attachment or physical attraction or X, Y, and Z. But for me, and my understanding of love at this point in time is the removal of agenda. Would you agree with that?
A sincere, unselfish love and caring. Yes.
Right. So, like, for example, let's just say you have two young people and they break up. And, it was a short lived relationship. And then, well, I love that person. I'm heartbroken. What I usually say to people in that situation is you didn't love that person. You had an attachment to that person. You had an infatuation or an obsession with that person. That person filled a space or a gap in your life. It wasn't love. Real love would be that you were ultimately happy that that person decided to go in a better direction for themselves. Then you can tell me you love that person.
Yes,
Would you
yes,
agree
I
with this?
completely agree.
Totally.
Okay. I think it's a very elevated understanding of love. I'm, again, not trying to pat myself on the back but after visually and emotionally and mentally experiencing these different things and hearing people speak of love, I think that they use that word incorrectly.
I would totally agree. And, sexual attraction and love can be enmeshed, and people don't realize it's a sexual attraction and it's not real love. Real love is unselfish, that you would throw yourself in front of a train to save the other person and gladly, be the hero in their life. And if you're really the hero, then you want that person's well-being much more than your own.
Or similar.
Yeah.
Love your neighbor as yourself kind of concept.
Yes.
Next question I have, which is actually more a response to you saying several times, I think you also mentioned it here in this interview, but in other interviews, I've heard you say that you don't believe in angels or demons.
No, I mean, the boogeyman's out there. There's no devil. There's, thought projections that you'll encounter that are your own. There's no, I don't think there's angels or demons, but I do believe there's helpers that were once,
Which is what the New Age community would refer to as guides.
Guides,
or
guides
spirit.
or helpers.
well, spirit seems to be broad. I think there's the guides or the helpers are individuals.
And
That are no longer alive.
is there like, in your opinion, is there like, hey, you're assigned to this person? Or is it like, hey, I see that person, I like what that person's doing, and let me go help that person?
I think that they're outside of physical reality. They were once people, I mean, they were once alive. They're individuals and they're very altruistic, and they come in and try to influence and guide in the positive direction at different times in our life. But I don't think they're walking around right behind you at all. I think they come in when you are in extreme distress or making the wrong decisions, or pushing you to the right decisions, or that if they push or nudge you, you could be helping somebody else in distress. But I don't think they're sitting on your shoulder every day waiting for you to while you're brushing your teeth.
Yeah. For example, let's just say that after it rains in my driveway, a bunch of worms will be there, and they're on their deathbed, right? After it rains, the worms come up, they're all in the driveway, they're on their deathbed. Let's just say that I come along and I pick up those worms and I put them back in the dirt and I save their lives, right? Let's just say that that's something that happens.
Yeah.
Isn't the worm is not aware of me? The worm doesn't know that I took mercy on it in that degree.
Right.
All the worm might know or might not know is that it was dying and now it's back in the dirt. Like some mystical, magical thing happened, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that that's happening between us and astral entities?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah. A lot of the guides or people that are connected to you in some fashion in this life or another life. But there's a connection to you. There's not an assignment.
Does that help?
I have no connection to that worm in my driveway.
But that worm, you're not having somebody behind you telling you to do those worms. You just decided to do it. You just decided to be a good guy. Or you could have looked the other way and she's been driving and squished them. That's kind of a random. But the guides that are the helpers that are connected to, there's a connection, perhaps not in this life, but in other lives. there's like an interweaving and an overlapping. I believe, especially pertinent to myself. Yeah.
Hmm. What is your take on aliens from like life forms on other planets?
Well, I'm sure, it's a big existence out there in physical reality. And I'm sure there are other life forms on other planets. Are they coming to visit us? I think it's pretty doubtful. I think they'd see our problems and just keep going.
In your
Well,
afterlife experience, you didn't experience any other kind of life forms outside of human and animal.
No, did not.
Do you think, again, this is a kind of a conspiracy kind of question, do you think it's possible that other life forms in other places have like their own source that's separate from the human source?
Oh, sure.
So different, like a whole different construct.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Interesting thing, interesting theory, right?
I'm open to that because my near-death experience was extremely humbling.
A couple rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Number one, what is your favorite trait found amongst human beings?
A sense of humor. I think I like that best out of people because this world is so baffling. I need to have a good giggle. Humor,
What is your least favorite trait found amongst humanity?
cruelty, unnecessary cruelty. It seems like such a waste, such a vacancy as a human experience that so many people are mean.
Do you think that people are mean because of a lack that they have inside of themselves?
A lack of love or self-love, perhaps, but then, you know, taking it out on an innocent person, that kind of cruelty and meanness.
That's
I
that's
think that the
power.
saddest,
Yeah, that's the saddest part of the human beings. That's the saddest aspect of them.
Is that where you think their power comes from, or where they think their power comes from, or where they get that
they're
feeling?
Misguided
misguided.
if they think that's power.
Yeah, but that is them enacting a power, isn't it?
Hmm.
Where the other side of it is your power could come from love, or it can come from self-indulgence and hatred and animosity. There's two sides of that
Mhm.
coin. If you could give one piece of advice to the world, what would it be?
Don't be judgy. Don't judge other people. I think that's a thing I think that
That's a
I
hard.
had to really let go of.
Well, last rapid question that I had for you was, what is your piece of advice you would give to yourself?
More self-love. I run short on that. I think I'm my own worst critic.
Don't be so critical of yourself.
Yes.
Mm. Laura, it was a pleasure having this conversation with you. Again, thank you not just for taking time out of your day to have this conversation with me and do another podcast after the hundreds you've done, but also thank you for helping me fill in some puzzle pieces, not just today, but before today as well.
Well, it was a pleasure getting to know you, and I hope some people that listen to my interview take some measure of value. And thank you for the opportunity to be on your show.
No,
Appreciate it.
thank you, Laura.